The first wave of grunge? Oh, definitely.
Punk to me was a way more important
Yeah.
musical movement, and it was actually something that seemed worldwide, where like in the mid 70s you had the Ramones in one hand in New York, and you had the Saints in Australia, and they're both writing almost identical music.
It's pretty similar
and
stuff.
There's no way they could have heard each other, because it was well before the internet or like.
Or they before they even had records out.
Before they had records out.
With punk rock, it's like pretty much 1977. There's suddenly thousands of punk bands all over the place. All kind of like-minded. Maybe it could be argued too like-minded musically after a year or so. But that happens.
But when we started out, we thought of ourselves as like part of the punk rock tradition.
Yeah.
And by that point, like by the mid '80s, punk rock had all sorts of like little splinters and fingers. It was just sort of like underground rock.
Right.
That's kind of what we thought of it.
Yeah, and the American underground music scene was really strong in like 1985, 86. Like there was great stuff. There was the Midwest craziness of Big Black and Killdozer and Naked Ray Gun. There was, the California, SST post-hardcore kind of Meat Puppets were part of that. They were a huge influence on me. There was the New York noise rock, Pussy Galore, Sonic Youth, Radar. There was a lot of really great stuff going on that we felt,
really connected.
Really connected. Dinosaur Jr., there's all sorts of great
They were
stuff.
just called Dinosaur then.
No, they were already Dinosaur Jr. by the second record,
yeah, okay.
Early '87. But anyway, there was a lot of strong stuff happening. And we thought we were just in that same direct line because we were all. You can point to any of those bands, and they were punk rockers in the hardcore scene, and then just started expanding on that very simple blueprint of, generic punk rock, and started freaking out basically. And so, I thought we were just in line with that. That was a scene I placed myself in, but I would have described it, probably as a grungy punk rock band, with some psychedelic, heavy, Blue Cheer, Stooges fascination. Yeah. Part of its demise was Kurt Cobain killing himself. That was definitely his demise. That was a huge, psychic blow on everybody. Not just in Seattle. I think everywhere people were suddenly very sick of being reminded of that, major tragedy in, in pop music. I guess at that point. So it wasn't surprising to me that, I was over it. I was over it twice in the Seattle scene. By 1990, I was over the Seattle scene. And then when it really exploded, I was really excited for my friends, and then really over the, that next crazy leg where there's fashion shows and, all sorts of stupid shit like that, You got to move on, the press is going to move on, the listeners are going to move on. It's not like they're going to yes, I want to listen to Alice in Chains, for the rest of my life. They're going to move on.
Well,
some people will, of course. But, plenty of people will move on to the next thing. The next bands that were big out of Seattle were a very different shade of rock and roll. The Presidents of the United States of America
and
Harvey Danger. They both had huge hits after Cobain died, and it was like sunshine pop, essentially, happy, feel-good music, and I think that's a direct result of, just kind of the bummer that everyone felt, so. We, however, stuck to our guns, and we made a grunge record in 1995. Didn't get us very far.